Jai Swaminarayan. Today we'll take a look at the life of Sadguru Sri Gopalanand Swami. Sadguru Gopalanand Swami was born to a Brahmin family in a small village called Todla, located in the Idar district of Gujarat. He was born on February 1st, 1781, or Vikram Samvat 1837, Mahasud Ashtami, making him around 2 months older than Bhagwan Swaminarayan. His father Moti Ram and mother Kushalba gave him the name of Kushal Bhatt. At a young age, he learned the ancient Hindu language of Sanskrit, and he also studied the scriptures such as the Vedas and other schools of knowledge such as astrology and astronomy. Kushal Bhatt was a great individual from a very young age. He used to play with the divine murti of Shamlaji every day after the mandir closed for Bhagwan's afternoon nap. Think about it. If Kushal Bhatt casually played with God himself at the age of 4 or 5, imagine how great he might have been. One day, Kushal Bhatt was playing with Shamlaji, but Kushal Bhatt and Shamlaji were so engrossed in their games that they lost track of time. When the pujari of the mandir rang the bell to wake Shamlaji up, Shamlaji sprinted towards the mandir, losing one of his jhanjars and his kesh, or an ankle ornament and silk cloth respectively. When the pujari woke Shamlaji up from his nap in the mandir, he noticed that one of the jhanjars and the kesh were missing. When the villagers took notice of this missing ornament, they grew worried because it was made out of gold and it was valuable. They started to falsely accuse the pujari for stealing the jhanjar. So the pujari began to pray to Shamlaji, and Shamlaji answered his prayers and told the pujari the exact location of the jhanjar and the kesh. The pujari searched for the ornament, and there they were. The jhanjar and the kesh were right where Shamlaji said they were. This was just a small glimpse of Kushal Bhatt's greatness. Later, Kushal Bhatt heard the name of Swaminarayan for the first time when two satsangis named Kashiram Bhai and Murlidhar Bhai from a village called Vadashinor met with Kushal Bhatt and introduced him to the Swaminarayan Sampradaya. Later, Kushal Bhatt met with a sadhu of Sriji Maharaj named Sarveshwaranand Swami. He described the greatness of Sriji Maharaj to Kushal Bhatt and took him to Dabhan, where Kushal Bhatt would meet Sriji Maharaj for the very first time. He was enlightened upon seeing him. He felt as if he found the only thing in his life that was worth living for. When he went back to his home, Todla, he would think of Maharaj even while eating, sleeping, and doing other daily activities. The only thing in his mind was the image of Sriji Maharaj that he met in Dabhan. He visited Maharaj many times before becoming a sadhu, and Sriji Maharaj even visited him in his hometown in Todla. One day, Sriji Maharaj decided to give Diksha or initiate Kushal Bhatt as a sadhu after seeing his selfless service to satsang and knowing his mind and desire to become a sadhu. He was given Diksha on Vikram Samvat 1864, Kartik Vad Ashtami, and was given the name of Gopalanand Swami. Gopalanand Swami had extraordinary powers. One day, Krishnaram Shastri, a staunch satsangi and astrologer, made a prediction stating that there would not be a lunar eclipse as per his calculations. But all the other astrologers in town argued that there was going to be an inevitable lunar eclipse. Both Krishnaram and the other astrologers argued, and finally, Krishnaram stopped the argument by betting his life. Gopalanand Swami came to hear of this and knew the satsangi's prediction was false, and there was in fact going to be a lunar eclipse on the day the other astrologers predicted. Gopalanand Swami gathered Krishnaram and the other astrologers and confidently declared that there would not be a lunar eclipse, even when the astrologers provided Gopalanand Swami with evidence of an eclipse, and he himself thought there was going to be an eclipse. On the day of the predicted eclipse, there was no sign of an eclipse. Then, Gopalanand Swami explained to Krishnaram that he should never bet like this under any circumstances. Gopalanand Swami said that there was going to be an eclipse, but by the grace of Sriji Maharaj, the eclipse was shifted. In fact, Gopalanand Swami himself used his powers to shift the eclipse but he said it was the grace of Shiji Maharaj. He did this because he did not think of himself as great as Shiji Maharaj, but instead he thought of himself as a humble servant. Another incident when Gopalanand Swami showed his superhuman powers was with Hemraj Shah. Hemraj Shah was a firm Vaishnav and believed solely in Krishna being the supreme being. Hemraj Shah was a doctor and had 4 sons. 2 of his sons, Punja Shah and Vana Shah, were satsangis of Shiji Maharaj, and they would always request him to become a satsangi too. However, Hemraj Shah stood firmly in his beliefs and would not budge. One day, Punja Shah and Vana Shah went to Gopalanand Swami and requested him for help to turn their father into a devotee of Shiji Maharaj. So Gopalanand Swami did. He pretended to be ill so that Hemraj Shah could check his health. When Hemraj Shah checked Gopalanand Swami's wrist for a pulse, he could not find anything. He even checked for a heartbeat, but he could not find one. A person without a heartbeat and a pulse should be dead, but Gopalanand Swami was relaxed and was casually speaking and acting as he would regularly. Finally, Hemraj Shah gave up and became enlightened. He said, "Swami, you are the incarnation of Krishna himself." Gopalanand Swami replied, "Hemraj Shah, I am not the incarnation of Krishna. Shiji Maharaj is the incarnation of Krishna, and I am just one of his many humble servants." From that day forward, Hemraj Shah, the person that would never think of becoming a satsangi, took up the Vratman and devoted his life to Shiji Maharaj and satsang. Gopalanand Swami made many stubborn people like Hemraj Shah into satsangis. For a time, Gopalanand Swami lived in Vadodara, a city in Gujarat known for its academic institutions. The Pandits and the government officials in this city were some of the most academically inclined in the entire state of Gujarat and India itself. They had very little respect for the philosophies and teachings of Swaminarayan Sampradaya. However, through Gopalanand Swami's satsang, most of these officials and Pandits became satsangis. One day, Shiji Maharaj took Santos and Haribhaktos to Rajkot to give darshan to Sir Malcolm, an English governor. The assembly was held outdoors, and Shiji Maharaj was seated under the shade of a jujube tree along with the Santos. When the assembly was completed, Maharaj and the Santos stood up to take their leave. When Gopalanand Swami rose, a thorn of the jujube tree pricked his rumal or the headcloth. Gopalanand Swami exclaimed to the tree, "Even when Shiji Maharaj is seated under you, you have not let go of your bad habit to prick others." Right when he finished his sentence, all the thorns of the tree fell off. This was the type of power that Gopalanand Swami held. That jujube tree is still without thorns today in Rajkot. Before Shiji Maharaj returned to Akshardham, he commanded all of his satsangis to stay under the guidance of Sadguru Gopalanand Swami. Santos and devotees would ask him for his guidance on major projects such as constructions of mandir and grand celebrations or utsavs. Even the Acharya Maharajas, Ayodhya Prasadji Maharaj and Raghuvirji Maharaj would seek his guidance. Sadguru Gopalanand Swami went to Akshardham on Samvat 1908 Vaishak Vad Chaturthi, or May the 7th, 1852. He left behind many great treasures for the Sampradaya. One of his most famous is the Pratishtha of the Kashtabhanjan Dev, or Hanumanji, in Sarangpur. It is said that Hanumanji himself stays within the Murti. He also began the tradition of Mahapuja, a sacred ritual of offerings to God, which is still performed today. He also wrote commentary on scriptures and wrote many books in Sanskrit, such as the Upanishad Bhashya and Gita Bhashya, to name a few. Gopalanand Swami spread satsang all over Gujarat and remained the humble servant of Shiji Maharaj till his very last breath. Jai Swaminarayan.